Chris Jurgensen. So today we're doing all blues, and the reason I'm doing all blues is because if you hadn't noticed, I posted a little video as, playing this song as sort of an advertisement for my sponsor, Diodario Strings, which I still have on, by the way. It's been like a month, and these are sounding pretty good. But and I got a lot of attention. It garnered a lot of attention, so I decided I would do a little bit of a video about it, about approaches on how to play it. The song lends itself well to guitar, and that's why I did it. But anyways, so when I started playing jazz music, I already had been playing blues and rock for a while, and the guys at my college wanted me to play jazz with them, and I couldn't swing with the really the hard bebop music. So I started with songs like this. Now I thought it was easy at first, but I realized that it's a lot harder than I thought it was. I don't know why I was so satisfied with my playing back then, but you have to sort of think about where the song came from. So this came out in 1958 on Miles Davis's Kind of Blue record. Now you have to think about what was going on before that. He was playing bebop with like Charlie Parker and guys like that, and I think he just got tired of that kind of music, of that language, and he wanted to find a way to express himself better because Miles had such a great tone, and great timing, and so for him, with bebop and music like that, timing is not so as important as like just getting the changes. Really, Miles wanted a way to express himself, so he got together with a bunch of younger musicians and did Kind of Blue. And so a lot of people think it's easy, but the truth is that when you listen to it, now that I'm more experienced, I listen to it and I say to myself, every one of these solos is just perfect. There's not a bad note in it. The timing is beautiful. Everybody gets to express themselves in their own unique way. And it's like a work of art, man, when you really listen to it. So I suggest you listen to it, if you really want to get into this, and you can copy some of the solos, And so Miles was trying to get away from the bebop language. He wanted to get into, like I said, something more, an easier way to express himself. So what was he looking for? I mean, I often think that playing a solo is sort of like drawing a picture or painting a picture or something, right? A painting. And bebop was more or less like a maze where the object was to outline everything and get through the maze until it comes around again, right? So more complicated. But this kind of music isn't really like that. It's slower tempo. It's in 3 or 6/8, and you have a lot more time on each chord. There's not like 2 5-1s leading up to everything. It's just 4 measures of G, and then 2 measures of C7, and so forth and so on. And the tempo is slow enough that there's just so much time. And so it's really like getting a white piece of paper and a pen and just trying to draw a picture of exactly what's on your mind and how you feel. And that's what this kind of music is. So now how do you want to approach it? Now, it depends on sort of the arrangement of how people play this, because I've heard a lot of crazy arrangements of this song. But if you're going to stick to like Miles Davis's original arrangement, it's sort of traditional in a lot of ways. You don't really hear sharp 11s or anything crazy like that so much. You do get some crazy stuff on that 5 chord and that flat 6 chord, but on the 1 and the 4 chord, it's sort of straight ahead dominant sounds. And so it's, as you probably heard, this is like a modal record, right? Kind of Blue. So I mean, it's really based off those modes, the Mixolydian mode for both those chords. We'll get to the 5 chord. That's a different story. So there's different ways to approach this, but let's try to stick to more of the traditional method that Miles and Coltrane and those guys did. Okay. So before we get to the solo part, let's talk about the rhythm parts a little bit, because a lot of this really lends itself well to the guitar. So look, here's like the horns do this sort of harmony thing like this. That's great on guitar. The melody, Miles Davis plays the head. I sort of play it like this. And I sort of try to mimic that little horn part for the C chord, and I play something like this. Now for that 5 chord in the flat 6, this is where something sort of interesting happens. The melody goes like this, but the chord, at least to me, sounds like this. This is like a D sharp 9 with a natural 5th on the top. So that's telling you it's like a diminished, half-whole diminished scale sound, right? Next, it goes up a half step. But what happens is that the melody here stays, and so then now the chord is going to turn into this chord, which is a D7 with a sharp 9 and a sharp 5. And it says that, it calls it a flat 13 in the chart that I have from the real book. Now, I never figured it out what was going on there, because I always heard it like this. But it's not like that, because the melody note is going to go like this. And then, you know. And so this is sort of the way that I play the head. And if you're interested in that, it'll be on Patreon, okay? The transcription of this way that I just played that. Next, now let's get into the solo part. So basically, let's talk, before we get to the 5 chord and the flat 6 chord, let's talk a little bit about the 2 dominant chords, the G7 and the C7. Now, for me anyways, you see, they're playing this, right? All these notes are from Mixolydian. And I'm not saying that you can't play Lydian dominant or any kind of crazy stuff, because you really can, but it's not going to sound like they played. So I'm sort of suggesting that, at least if you're going to play to this arrangement, like the original kind of arrangement, that you do it by, traditional methods that sort of that they went by, right? So first of all, G7 and the C7, and then even the 5 chord and the flat 6 chord, which I'll get to a little bit later, you can play blues on it. And there's Miles Davis and those guys hint at that a lot, of just like a pentatonic sound. So let's just check that out and see what that sounds like if we were to play it that way, okay? Plain old blues, like, I would play over like a sort of a blues, an Albert King tune or something like that, right? But so next up, maybe you want to try to start to incorporate more of the Mixolydian sound. So one trick that I sort of like, and remember, Mixolydian, G Mixolydian, is going to be C major, right? And then C Mixolydian for that 4 chord is going to be F major. So you want to really practice those two applications. But one thing that I sort of do a lot in these situations where I want to sound a little fancy, maybe I'll play the minor pentatonic scale for the 1 chord, and for the 4 chord, so in this case, G over G7, I'm playing the G minor pentatonic scale, or the G blues scale. Now, when the chord changes to C, I'm thinking G Dorian, really, for the C chord. Not for the, I don't want to play G Mixolydian, G Dorian for the 1 chord. I want to play it for the 4 chord. Why? Because that's still F major, remember? And that's what C Mixolydian is. Think about that for a second. If it's confusing, then you want to think about it. C7, we want F major. That's C Mixolydian, right? But G Dorian is also C Mixolydian. It's the same F major scale as the mama of those two scales, those two modes. So, now why would I think that way? Well, I think that way sometimes because sometimes I hear the blues as like a major 1 chord and then a minor 1 chord. Now, why would I say that? Because look, G7, right? Here's C9, right? But look, if you play that C9 over a G bass note, it's G6, G minor 6. Think about that for a minute. So I sort of sometimes hear the blues like, G7 and G6. So, and I think that might even be the origins of blues, but what do I know? So, a lot of times I'll just play the G minor pentatonic scale, and then over the C7, I'll just play C Mixolydian, but as a G Dorian sound, if that makes sense. So, let me just play that for you, and you'll sort of hear why that works, okay? So, here we go. Okay, did you hear what I did? I played the G blues scale, and then for the C7 chord, I played G Dorian, but of course that's the same as C Mixolydian, okay? So that's one way of thinking about it. Now, of course, you can play Mixolydian for both of these. That's perfectly fine. And that's a lot. That's sort of what Miles and those guys did on this, all right? So let's listen to that a little bit. And also remember, anytime that you have, now even though I said they were trying to get away from the bebop language, you hear a little bit of that. And so you can use Barry Harris's chromatic scale. If you want to learn more about that, go back to the lessons. But I think in my solo, I played something that went like this. Something like that, right? That's typical bebop language. I go up E minor. From there, I go down Barry's chromatic scale. Remember, this is C major scale, G Mixolydian, right? No, that's actually not what I did. I went. That's a B minor 7, flat 5 arpeggio. But I do a pivot arpeggio, right? I go, instead of going up the arpeggio, I go from the B to the D below. From here, I do the same thing, pivot from G, which would be G7 in this key, right? E minor 7 in this key. Pivot again, and I just do the typical chromatic scale. I'm on F, I go up in a F major 7 arpeggio. It's fancy, right? So these are ideas that you can use as well. Now, if you want to do like Lydian dominant and stuff like that, you can. It feels a little odd to me in this situation, but you can. And remember, when you're playing Mixolydian, if you go back to my Mixolydian lessons, you would know there's really 4 minor pentatonic scales you can use. If you're thinking blues, you can, for G7, right? You can play it on the root. So obviously, G minor 7 is a good choice for G7, right? You can play up a second, which would be A minor, D minor, which is on the 5th, and E minor, which is E minor pentatonic scale, but that would just be G major pentatonic. And you can do the same thing for C7. On the root, the 2nd, the 5th, and the 6th. So C minor, D minor, G minor, A minor pentatonic scale. Those are all possibilities. They don't really do that so much, but you could if you wanted to. Let's listen a little bit to that and see what that sounds like. Good sounds too, interesting sounds. You know, they sound, because you play a lot of the upper extension on these chords when you do that, so you sound fancy. So today's lesson is going to be in 2 parts, just because it's, after getting it done, it was way too long. So I'm going to dedicate another lesson completely to that 5 and flat 6 chord that we get, because there's so much involved with playing over those chords in particular. So stay tuned for the next one.